What's up, guys? I'm going to show a few quick tips on soldering. I'm going to remove the stock servo lead. This is just an old servo on a linear servo. We're going to add a E-flite ultraflight lead. Again, this is just for illustration, not actually going to use it. Then we're going to put a servo lead on a ESC. First thing, temp controlled soldering iron is definitely best. This is a Weller WES51. You can get it for about $100 in the store, probably $70-80 online. You won't regret the purchase. The other thing is, as far as your soldering tips, use the biggest one you can get away with. These are probably too small. I'm going to skip those. These are about the same. I'll go with this one. Has a slightly pointy tip. Alright, so our little iron holder, the sponge, you want to get that wet. You got to keep the iron tip clean. Always have to keep the iron tip clean and tin. Tin means covered with solder. Turn the iron on, set it for 600 degrees. Also, you can see we have the little Brillo pad in here, brass Brillo pad. I've already stripped the wire leads, and we're going to tin the wire leads and then trim them and then just solder them on the boards. Once the light starts blinking, we'll be up to temp. Alright, we should be good. Now I'm just going to put a little coating of solder on the tip. I'm going to go ahead and clean it off on the sponge. Wipe it down, and you can see when it's good, you can see that the solder will flow over it real well. Alright. Generally, for something this small, you don't need a lot of solder on the iron. Just a very small amount is all you need. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the stock wires. Let me untwist this lead so I can get a good hold on it. Get a little dab of solder on there and just heat up the contact and pull the wire out. There we go. There's one. Alright, you'll see me wipe the tip clean. Generally after every joint, add another blob of solder on there. Alright, that's good. Alright, now depending on which side you need to solder your leads to, like if this is your elevator servo, you'll want to solder it on the mechanic side. Otherwise, for the roll servos, it doesn't matter. But for this one, we'll just we'll prep the other side for soldering by scraping off the silicone that's on there in stock form. We're going to take some flux. Put a little flux on the contacts here. And then we're going to get this surface prepped with a little bit of solder on the pads to take the wires. Okay. All right, so now we're going to prep the wires. You can see that I haven't stripped much. It's real short because when you tin these wires, some of the insulation melts. These really thin wires. So here we're going to utilize the rosin core and the solder. Just going to tin up each wire real quick. Alright, you see some of the insulation is melted away, and I'm going to trim it to about how much I need. Now I'll clean off the wires with alcohol to remove the flux. Alright, so we're just going to clean this excess flux off of the wires. Alright, so when we go to excuse me, when we go to solder the leads onto the board, again, keep your tip clean. Get a fresh coat, very small fresh coat of solder. You want to find a really good comfortable working position to do the soldering on. I always like to do on these boards, I always like to do the middle wire first. And I'm going to touch the there's too much solder. I'm going to touch the circuit board to kind of get that blob melted a little bit. Not enough. And then we're going to add our wire. And that's it. We do the signal wire on these linear servos. The signal wire is always towards the mechanics. The ground wire is always on the outside. So same thing. There you go. These are servo leads. Solder on the circuit board. Alright, so now we're going to solder the BEC lead onto an ESC. Same thing, I've already stripped the wires. Wipe off my solder tip. Get a good blob of solder on it. We're going to tin the wires. Making use of that rosin core and the solder. Alright, now we'll clean off the wires and we'll trim off the excess. Alright, so wires are cleaned and trimmed. Now let's prep the ESC. This one's already pretty well done. But we'll put a little bit of fresh solder on the pads. Make sure it melts real easily. Alright. I'm going to go ahead and apply. I usually always use flux on when I'm soldering anything on circuit boards. Normally I'll put a little coating of flux on it. When I'm tinning wires, I generally just use the rosin core. The thing with the rosin core solder is it burns off pretty quick. So you don't need flux if you're really fast. So as soon as you dab the solder to the spool, you need to get it to the wire as quick as possible. That's why I use flux. I guess I'm just not fast enough. Alright. So again, I start with the middle wire. I'm going to heat the pad up. And then put my wire on there. That's the red wire. Go to the ground wire. And hold on, we're going to put this in a helping hand. It's moving around. Another useful thing you can buy for real cheap, a helping hand with the alligator clips magnifying glass. Really helps a lot. Alright, clean solder tip. Get another small coating of solder. Alright. So, wipe down the tip, apply new solder. Make sure you got a good angle. Make sure you got a good comfortable angle. Make sure that you're make sure you got a good angle so that when you touch the pad that you're ready to put the wire on there. So again, I'm gonna melt that solder on the pad, put the wire on there. That's it. And we'll do the signal wire. And that's it. Alright, I know that was quick, but that's pretty much the basics. You need a good temperature controlled iron. You need to keep the tip clean. You need to keep the tip the iron tip tinned. You need to keep it from oxidizing. You need rosin core solder. Again, flux I always use on circuit boards. This applies to pretty much any small electrical soldering. Here's another example here, like where the motor wires go. What I said earlier about matching the size of the tip to the solder pads. This tip is actually a little too small to use here because it takes too long to melt all the solder, and you can end up overheating the board. I think there's a 3 to 5 second rule on touching circuit boards with a soldering iron. So when you go to when I go to solder motor wires on here, I normally use a larger tip, so that the solder melts real fast. And that's pretty much the basics. Hope it helps.